Welcome to Flip My Future podcast, hosted by Bradley and Michelle Dorsey. This show's packed with actionable tips, inspiring stories, and expert advice for flipping houses and building wealth. Whether you're a seasoned investor or just getting started, there's something here for everyone. Let's flip your future.
Hi, and welcome to the Flip My Future podcast. I'm your host, Bradley Dorsey. Today we have an amazing seasoned real estate investor, Jonathan Katz. He's been involved in many aspects of the real estate industry. I'll let him tell a little bit more about his experience here in a second. But Jonathan, I just want to thank you for being on the show and just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're up to.
Well, thanks for having me. Basically, I'm currently at this point in time working in the renovation business in all aspects of it, everything from execution to design. And, I love this business, so I try to get involved in every part of it.
So you're so humble. I mean, he's talking about being involved in the renovation aspect, but I mean, this guy is doing like amazing design stuff, high-end houses. I've walked some of your properties. I've seen photos of others that you're working on now, and you guys do some amazing stuff. So give the listeners a little bit more perspective about what type of properties you're talking about designing.
Beggars can't be choosers, so we kind of have a whole gambit, but essentially, we're doing everything from 650 square foot ground up properties to doing 9,000 square foot full on, gutted renovation, build outs, high end, elevators, all that kind of stuff.
That's crazy. So how do you get to that point though? Obviously you've done this a long time and you've worked in different aspects of real estate, flipping, the remodel side of it, design aspect. I know you were originally in the loss mitigation, stuff like that, which a lot of our listeners are not even going to know what that is. Can you explain what that is? And then just, a quick version of how you got to where you're at today.
Sure. So the 30-second version of it is basically back in 2001, I was working for Countrywide in their mortgage assistance services section. So basically, I would deal with short sales, loan modifications, deed in lieu, basically anything that existed as a way to help people when they were dealing with problems. In 2005, I created my own company because I kept hearing from the people that I would be speaking to on collection calls, basically, how come you're the first person telling me this? And how, after we spoke, I can actually sleep tonight. So those things kind of stuck with me, and I first started off within a company in 2005. Which is still around today, and basically helping people find solutions for their mortgage problems. That kind of led into around 2010, starting my own real estate brokerage, and ultimately, this business is super relationship based. And so over the years, we've kind of formed a lot of relationships similar to how do we get here now? Well, in 2012, I started my first flip. I started with a condo. We had Blackwater backup on the first deal we've ever done. It was a total nightmare. But you just kind of keep at it. And over the years, we just kind of rolled from one opportunity to the next. And ultimately, projects got bigger or more numerous. And eventually, you kind of go for the gold and you get into some of those deeper level projects. At first, they were taking, 30, 60, 90-day type rehabs, and then you end up at an 18-month rehab. So, it all just depends. But essentially, how did I get now? I'd say that largely it's building a lot of relationships, taking care of people. And to be honest, I've actually still renovating and working with the same contractor that I did since 2012. And I know that that's ultimately very rare to be with the same contractor since the beginning. But actually he's the man, we've built a relationship. And, at the beginning when we first met him, he was just a sub. Now he became a GC probably 10 years ago. And ultimately since then, even on these super high-end projects, he just steps in and comes in when other contractors have kind of fallen apart. And so, that's kind of the short version of it.
You basically started out working on the mortgage side, and you figured out, you found a way that you could help homeowners, maybe resolve some of their issues with mortgages, and you were able to turn that into business. And then you flipped your first condo. At that point, did you have renovation experience, or was it more just the mortgage experience and you decided, hey, I'm going to jump into, flipping something and basically learn as you go, or did you already have construction experience as well?
Great question. So at the beginning, no, actually I had no experience. I mean, look, I grew up with a father that it didn't matter which house we were in, we were always living in the middle of a renovation. So like, I'm not going to say I had zero experience, but I never, at that age, I never worked with the contractors. I wasn't a part of it. I saw, like, I lived through the contractor process, but no, I really had no experience.
So did you make money on your first flip or?
The first one was killer. Like, we were actually lucky enough that on the first one, we actually got in at like 215. We ended up going ahead and moving, like I mentioned, we got stuck with the Blackwater situation where the plumbing ended up backing up into our unit. We were on the first floor. It pretty much wrecked all the work. We were ready to hit the market, and this happened. The insurance wouldn't cover us. It was like they were pointing at the HOA. The HOA was pointing at someone else. It was a whole big mess. But luckily, with the way everything got timed, we actually were there. It was next to the Americana. And so, I mean, kind of, we were just lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time. We listed at 340 and we ended up exiting at 370. We got an above asking offer. And 2012, which it rolled into 2013, that was kind of the rebound of the 2008 meltdown. There was literally almost like a 50% increase in property values at that point in time.
I think part of that too is just being in the right location, right? So picking the right property, finding the right location, like that can completely save you at the end of the day too. So
100%. Yeah, absolutely. I would say that we got lucky. From that one, we rolled into one in Duarte, which is a little bit like down the road from Glendale. And, we kind of got in again at a 360. We exited at like 525. That was a very small rehab. There was some work that needed to be done, but it wasn't substantial. And it just kind of, after that, we jumped into a Culver City one. And, we were kind of just rolling from one project to the next.
So it sounds like you were, successful even on your first flip, which is, I don't want to say unheard of because a lot of people can be very successful on their first flip, but there's definitely, you're taking a risk, you're stepping out, doing something maybe you haven't done before. It's kind of a learning curve. So to be able to make a profit on your first flip is amazing. Tell me about a property that was not successful. Like what has been the most difficult property you dealt with?
I hate to sound like I've been living some perfect life or anything. To be honest, I don't know that there's been really one that I've ever lost money on, and there hasn't been any that I've ever not done well. But for example, I know that we had first met many years ago and that you came to one of our penthouse renovations. And that particular unit, we had purchased it with a very unique buyback clause. And the actual situation that occurred with that person was that they were living out of the country. Then they started telling us they were sending us a wire. The wire would never hit. They would send us fake proof of the wire. Then they would go ahead and tell us that they were suing the bank because of the wire or because of some sort of money issue. That situation kind of drew on for many, many years, actually. I think I ended up holding that property for 3 or 4 years. So while we ended up being successful in that one, profitability-wise, it was quite an adventure in the legal side of things.
So a lot of hurdles you had to go through, but at the end of the day, you still made a profit, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the big things with real estate, any business, you have to learn how to pivot. When something doesn't work out the way you originally anticipated, you just have to figure out a way to make that project successful. And with real estate, the numbers are so big. If you know what you're doing, you usually can have multiple exit strategies, different potential renovation plans. There's usually a way to make profit and be able to do something with that property, even if it's turning something into a rental that that hasn't sold or whatever. But again, I think so much of it is just picking the right property, picking the right location, knowing your numbers in advance, and learning from everybody that you can to avoid a lot of the pitfalls and mistakes that new investors make.
Yeah, I think I've heard this. I don't know if it was Warren Buffett or who it was, but there's usually this phrase that you make your money when you buy. And 100%. So for sure, like you said, location, that's major. Sometimes you can't afford location, so you start to bleed out into, a location adjacent. But yeah, it's absolutely one of those things where you want to have multiple exit strategies, at least understanding if you're stuck holding the property, what's the rent look like, in the area and things like that.
So if you were starting from scratch, though, you say you didn't have any experience in real estate, maybe you're working a 9 to 5 job, but you just always aspired to be a real estate investor. Maybe you watch those home flipping shows. Maybe you like the design, you like the transformation aspect. You know that you can make good profit flipping houses, but you don't know how to get started. How would you start from scratch if you had to start over today?
That's something that it's a lot easier said than done, right? When we look back, we know a lot more than when we started. I think that there's many different ways. The first thing is just really get in wherever you can fit in. And so ultimately, if you can work with a contractor and get to know about the trades, that's like one way. Another thing that I think is often overlooked by many people is getting in as a wholesaler. If you can go in and get these opportunities to an investor, many times those investors will let you shadow them. You can get in and you can make a buck without having to really spend money. I mean, sure, the marketing, you could say there's an argument to say that the marketing could cost money, but everybody knows somebody, and often everybody knows an agent. And the same way that everybody knows an agent, everybody knows someone that's trying to sell their house. And very few people live in I'm not saying that people don't live in beautiful homes, but not everybody's living in a completely renovated house. That's kind of like not as often. So you can find people who are in these kind of halfway points, or even at the beginning where their house hasn't been touched since the 50s or 60s or 70s, and then work with an investor who comes in, brings the money, and there's different types of arrangements. But again, I think that if I were to start again, I think maybe the entry level is wholesale.
I totally agree with you, Jonathan. A lot of people are not going to know what wholesaling is. So
Sure.
just to explain that just really quickly, wholesaling is basically where you find a property, you get it under contract yourself, you have the contract on the property for a certain amount. Let's just say, $200,000 for an example. You have a contract for $200,000. You go out and market that contract to another investor, and you offer to sell the contract for $215,000, $220,000, whatever the difference is. That's your profit. So maybe you make $15,000, $20,000 or whatever. Just as a quick example, and this is just to be able to let people know it's not that hard to wholesale. My primary business has been flipping houses. I love flipping houses, love the transformation. But recently I decided to try to find a property just to prove to somebody else that I could do it really quickly. I started looking on the MLS. I found a property in Texas, a city that I never went to. I made multiple offers in that market. This is just a couple of months ago. And I made an offer on a property, got it under contract. I resold that property, the contract to another investor, made a $20,000 profit. I never saw the house, never went to the city, never met the agent, and did all of this within a week, which is amazing. And some people don't make that much money, working 3 or 4 months, and even like I have several kids, this, and I'm trying to teach this to my kids too, because I don't want to see them, working for somebody else, working some 9 to 5 job where they're stuck in a cubicle or something, and they're making $5,000 a month when you can make $20,000 a week wholesaling. It's not that hard to get started. So if you haven't got involved in real estate, I would definitely encourage you to explore that more.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And the reality is that even when you say contracts, sometimes I think that gives people some level of anxiety. And so the reality is that you can even have just relationships. You can build those by going to REI meetups or even just Facebook groups. And you can meet the right people and then form the right relationships. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of opportunity out there. And so you don't even necessarily have to have a contract. Often you just have a good relationship that's based on trust. And don't get me wrong, a lot of people will take advantage of that trust. There are many times where you'll work out an arrangement and then someone won't pay you. But the reality is that there's opportunities that, you're not going to bring that person another opportunity. And so I think it's critical, to build those kinds of relationships. And yeah, so you can do it the contract way where you get someone under contract and then you sell that contract. But you can also do it where you're like what they call a bird dog, where you basically are out there finding those deals for investors.
Yeah, so basically somebody else could go and find a property and they bring that property to us. We pay them
Exactly.
to be able to purchase, basically for the information, to be that connection. We pay them for that.
Yeah, or the relationship.
Right.
Because the thing is that, again, relationship-based business, these people know somebody, and that somebody is possibly the seller, or is possibly, the seller's cousin or whatever. Right. They know somebody, and there's some connection, and they can open a door. And that door opening can be worth $5,000. It could be worth $20,000. I mean, I've heard of some wholesale fees as much as $100,000, maybe even more. Like the reality is, it just depends on the opportunity and how you skin the numbers.
Yeah. So, I know some new investors that don't like the idea of buying from another wholesaler or whatever, and they don't want somebody else to make that profit. You mentioned the $100,000 profit.
Yeah.
I personally have bought like 2 or 3 properties where the wholesaler made $100,000 or more off of me, just by me taking over that contract and purchasing the property. At the end of the day, I don't care what that fee is. I really don't. As long as it's a good property, it's a good investment for me, and I'm going to be able to make money in the end. Then I don't care what the profit, what profit that wholesaler made. So it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It doesn't need to scare you away. It's all about running the numbers, making sure it's going to be something that you'll be able to be successful with. But yeah, I mean, I'm just honestly, Jonathan, I'm passionate about real estate. I love it. I know you do too. And we're always just trying to find ways of doing more business, creating partnerships, win-win situations with everybody involved. And I know that that's what you do as well.
Yeah, and something that just kind of bubbled up, so I'm going to share it, is that you mentioned earlier, like, how do you get started as well? And another thing I would recommend is going back to the Facebook groups. There's like a lot of groups where people are sharing deals. What you should be spending your time on is looking at deals. You and I have been through enough projects where we can look at a deal and we understand that the numbers make sense sometimes almost instantly. But for people who are just starting, and even if they don't have money, if you're going to bring this to an investor, and this is, to be honest, one of my semi-pet peeves, but not, is that a lot of times when wholesalers bring deals, they haven't thought about the numbers. And so they bring me an opportunity that's not really an opportunity. And so, when you bring something to someone, you should have that investor mindset. You should know how they're going to make money, not just thinking about how you're going to make money on the difference, but how's the end buyer going to make money? What is their reality?
That's so true. I think there's a lot of people that, that they're scared that they're not going to be able to find somebody to, buy that property or whatever. But at the end of the day, if the numbers are good, and people are going to come out of the woodwork, to help you fund that property or, buy the property themselves. Real estate investors like us, as long as the numbers make sense, like, you're going to be able to sell that deal at the end of the day. So, it's all about just building the relationships, finding the right properties. I know people that have been successful even door knocking. People, for anybody that doesn't know what that is, you literally just go through, find a neighborhood, low inventory, sought after neighborhood, knock on the door and ask somebody if they're interested in selling. You might have to knock on 100 doors to be able to get that one, but if you get that one, I mean, it's still definitely could be worth it.
Yeah, there's definitely some people who are like, that's their bread and butter. I can tell you a unique story about my team, and that I had 2 agents that worked for one of our brokerage, and they would go ahead and they would knock on doors. They went months and they didn't get a single deal. Then I had another guy that he would knock on 5 doors and he'd come home with 3 telephone numbers. Play to your strengths. I think that that's really important. Different people have different strengths. I don't want to disincentivize anybody from going out and doing door knocking. But if you feel like you're better behind the phone, if you feel like you're better behind the computer, if you don't like to do the face-to-face, then, stick to your strengths as well.
No, it's really good. So from your experience, though, how do you like to find deals? Is it more having relationships and people bringing these deals to you, or are you actually actively looking for deals on the MLS? Are you doing any sort of marketing for off-market properties? How do you find properties?
So I would tell you that most of mine has been a blessed journey, and I've been very lucky with the relationships I've built. Because I've worked nationally and worked with hundreds, if not really even thousands of real estate agents, we actually have been kind of lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time many times. I think it's important that people know that don't ever be worried about selling a deal, because if it's a deal, there's always money. And so I think that's important.
So you talk about having relationships out of state. Like, do you currently invest out of state, or is that something you're going to do in the future?
So yeah, no, I've definitely invested out of state. I actually look more for buy and hold opportunities out of state. I'm not saying that I wouldn't do a flip out of state under the right circumstances. I definitely would. But I've had properties that are Section 8, and I've had properties that are just usually duplexes, or fourplexes or things like that. That's usually what I'm looking for.
Okay.
But I would like to get into more of a commercial space. I haven't, and that'll be my honest truth on that one. But I definitely would like to get more into multifamily.
Cool. Yeah, no, same thing here. My long-term goal is definitely to own more multifamily. But one thing I want to point out on the show is that a lot of the time that's how you're able to have the funds to ever do that first multifamily property is by flipping houses. Flipping houses is honestly, I feel like the quickest way to make large sums of money, and then you can roll that back into other investments. That's the same thing that my wife Michelle and I have done. We started flipping basically with nothing a few years ago. We've bought and sold over $50 million just in the last 4 years alone. And we've been able to acquire other investment properties. We currently own a boutique hotel in Palm Springs. We have vacation rental properties. But those would not have been possible if it wasn't for flipping houses and making big chunks of money at a time. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I'm a guy that's very analytical. And so I always try to sit back and kind of analyze, what's the best cheese? What's the best way to build this?
So wait, what is the best cheese?
well, ultimately my cheese, let's put it like that. Where am I spending my time every day? I've got a limited number of tokens that I can put, let's call them 24 tokens, and where am I going to put those? And so ultimately I try to look at the things that produce the most amount of money for the most efficient use of my time. And so, ultimately, like you said, flipping brings some of the largest returns. I think that if I were to look at it like a hierarchy, I'd say there's wholesaling, then that kind of leads into flipping, then that leads into more buy and hold. Once you flipped enough, you kind of start to get that monthly cash flow and consistency with rentals. And then obviously you take those rentals and you 1031 into multi-units and multifamily and start building up that portfolio. And the goal is to always kind of build on that percentage rate. California has for a long time been a 3 to 4%, return kind of state, what they call cap rate. But ultimately, other states, so we were talking about going out of California for multi-units, and that's because some of those houses were 15, 20, or 25% cap rates, which are, unheard of in big metropolitan areas.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. My view on owning rental property in California, I definitely would take those funds and invest out of state because, like you said, a lot of other places you can get a lot better return on your money, and it's also just more landlord friendly in other states like
Yes.
Florida and Texas and places like that.
Yeah.
California just has too many restrictions. They definitely cater to the tenant. It's a whole other show, but we've dealt with issues with that.
That's actually become my specialty.
So yeah, we could talk about this later, but we got stuck with a property basically through the pandemic where somebody didn't pay rent for 2 years, and it was costing me nearly $6,000 per month for 2 years, and it's a really frustrating situation because it's just, California is difficult, and we lost money on that property. Fortunately, we were making good money on other properties. We're able to keep the property and everything, but it's just unfair. And at the end of the day, it's we learned a really tough lesson. And at this point, we'd definitely invest out of state for rental properties.
Like you said, maybe it's another podcast, but I literally had very similar situation, except I don't know about yours, but on mine, they were even subleasing. So they were making money. I wasn't.
That's crazy. Do you hear that? So Jonathan owned a property and somebody was not paying rent and they were actually renting it to somebody else. So they were making money and Jonathan wasn't, which is, that's crazy. But again, I think that's another podcast, Jonathan. But
yeah,
that's one thing I want to point out too, though, is it's how important it is for a new investor to find somebody like you or I as a mentor, just to learn from, because we have went through a lot of things and we know what mistakes to avoid. And you don't have to go through that same thing that we went through, because you can learn from us.
Yeah.
So out of all the stuff you've done in real estate, construction, flipping, everything you've dealt with, what are you most passionate about? What do you like to do nowadays?
To be honest, I'm kind of still doing all of the above, but my true passion, I'd have to say, has become the design. The design part is by far my favorite. We've kind of created our design brand. We're picking up more and more clients in that area. But we do a lot of different things. And so like flipping will always be, a major part of our crown jewel. But, the design work is really my inspiration, and is my favorite part of all the flips anyways.
That's cool. So tell people a little bit about your new venture that you're doing right now.
After doing about 80 projects, I ended up with a lot of CAD designs, a lot of like pre-made, like we blood, sweat, and tear broke these designs down. And many times we were breaking the industry, meaning when we'd go to list, our properties would outsell everything in the market by 10 or sometimes 20% or even more.
And this is just having something unique with like the layout or the functionality, the design. What is it?
I think it was just like quality work. A lot of times people cut a lot of corners. A lot of flippers just trying to save a buck or two here and there. And we found that by spending a little bit extra, it's actually paid off every single time for us. So basically what we did was we took all of our designs, and when we were flipping 9 houses at one point in time, we kind of got to a place where it was death by 1,000 paper cuts, just all the decisions we had to make. So we would be kind of like on flip number 10 or 15 or whatever, and we'd be like, 5 flips ago, what was that color we used? And so what we ended up doing was we created this palette where we have 66 lines, 13 different styles, so 5 lines per style or 5 or more lines per style. And essentially you can choose the kitchen you want, the bedroom you want, the bathroom you want, and boom, we tailor it to any house. So it's just like a very quick way for us to design homes, our own flips, but also those of clients.
Well, that's awesome. I think that's one of the biggest issues, like you said, is most flippers never systemize their business. And especially when you're dealing with renovations, there's so many things, there's so many decisions that have to be made, so many finishes that have to be picked, so many colors, so many light fixtures and hardware and doors and windows and flooring. There's so many different things, and a lot of people don't systemize that. And it honestly, like if you're doing multiple flips at a time, can be very, very incredibly stressful. It can be overwhelming.
Sure.
And almost not even be worth being in the business, because it can just drain you and take your life away, but it doesn't have to. Like you said, you can systemize it, or work with somebody that has already created those systems, and and be able to implement the system somebody else already created.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This for sure has become a time saver for us. And every time we're doing new projects, many of those ideas get folded into new lines. So that way, again, like you said, the system is there for duplicating. Tinyrooms.io has been our love project for the last, year and a half, 2 years, because creating 66 lines and all the CAD drawings and everything for each one of them, and for it to be a scalable business, has taken some time, but we're pretty much ready to get launched. And, like you said, it's our new project.
So people can already go to the website, tinyrooms.io. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Cool. Yeah. So definitely check it out. I mean, Jonathan, he has so much experience. I really appreciate you being on the show today. Is there anything else that you want to add that we didn't cover?
Just you got to love what you do. That's the most important thing. If you're inspired by this business, go for it. If you're inspired by the money, I don't know that I would recommend it. I'm not saying that you can't make money in it, but you got to want something more than just money.
Yeah, one other thing is, like you're talking about, you have to love it. But at the same time, I think there are people that love it and they never take the action to do something.
Sure.
I've ran into a lot of people that have wanted to flip houses, wanted to invest in real estate for years.
Yeah.
Maybe they go to these, real estate meetups, over and over and over, and they analyze these deals all the time, but they never actually take action and do something. So can you give people, what would be that first action step?
I think, you hit a couple of those things, which is going to the meetups and then obviously analyzing deals. But I think that one of the biggest things you can do is actually just get in there and start talking to people, start actually trying to discuss the numbers of the deals, trying to figure those things out. And again, if you can figure out how to skin the deal for an investor, then you're in a place where, the only difference is now you got to either bring the money yourself or you find someone who has the money. And, something that, always helps me, they have that show, How It's Made. so you kind of see like how things are made behind the scenes, is that, look, one of the most traditional and typical things is when an investor brings the money, people do like a 50-50 with you. If you're going to do all the work, you bring the deal, you do everything like that, and someone else brings the money, often that's a transaction. And over the years, as you get better, you can I don't want to say minimize it, but you can begin to, reduce how much you have to pay people for money because you have hard money and you have other options, that ultimately that money has only a certain value. I think the only other thing that I think, if I was going to give someone a great tip of like, oh, how do I find someone with money, is I saw this really great course, and I can't remember the name of it, but basically what the lady had mentioned was that you can go to ListSource, and a lot of people go to listsource.com to build a list to mail. But one thing I had never thought of is that she used ListSource in order to find private lenders, and that she would look for private lenders who had lent within the last 6 months. And then you can kind of start going after those people and start calling, start seeing if they'd be interested in more deals, start making more calls. Or you can work with your local title company and ask title reps if they can give you a list of all the homes bought by an LLC or a corporation within the last 6 months or a year. You can start reaching out to them, maybe do a reverse lookup, maybe see what you can find on the state website. Those would be some of the things that I maybe would say is a good start.
Well, that's some great tips. I mean, honestly, that's how we were able to do our first flip. And we didn't have the cash to do the deal. So we found the property, got the contract on the property, found a private investor to basically partner with us to put down the down payment, fund some of the holding costs. We split the profit with us, 50-50. And what's really cool is like once you're successful and you do that, you're able to prove yourself, then it's not hard to raise money after that. It just isn't. And we work with all the same partners that we worked with when we started. And we've created good relationships with these people. Just a couple of weeks ago, my wife's, we're expecting a baby right now. Just a couple of weeks ago, some of our original partners were at our baby shower, and we've become friends with these people. And so much of it, it's more than just business. You also build these relationships where you just have new friends, and you just work together to do deals. You make money at the same time and have fun doing it. And later on, we got to a point where we didn't have to partner with people anymore. But there's always ways to create partnerships and win-win situations with everybody. So it's a fun business. I love it. Jonathan, can you just tell people how they can follow you, how they can get in contact with you?
So for Tiny Rooms, you can look me up under Instagram or under Twitter or X at tinyrooms.io. And aside from that, if anybody needs hard money or they want to talk to me about loss mitigation, they're putting in offers on short sales or things like that. We work with a very wide investment group nationally. So you can reach me at acgnow.com. That's A like Apple, C like Charles, G like George, and now like right now.com.
Awesome. Jonathan, it's been great having you on the show. Really appreciate your time today. I look forward to doing a deal with you in the future together, and hope we can connect again and do another show together. But so this has been the Flip My Future podcast. Again, I'm your host, Bradley Dorsey. Our guest was Jonathan Katz. And if you love the show, please give us a 5-star review, like and follow us. Appreciate you guys, and we look forward to helping you be very successful as a real estate investor.
Thank you for tuning in to the Flip My Future podcast. We hope you found today's episode insightful and inspiring. Remember that whether you're a seasoned investor or just starting out, the journey to financial freedom begins with taking action. Be sure to subscribe for more actionable tips and expert advice on flipping houses and building wealth. Together, let's flip your future and unlock your full potential. Until next time, take care and happy flipping.